Hey, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Devs Like Us. As always, I'm JB, and today we have a special guest, Miss Shruthi Murthy. She currently holds the position as the head of engineering at Modern Treasury. She previously worked at WhatsApp as the lead of the payments engineering team, which was a product that her team worked to build from the ground up. Shruthi was also one of the first female engineers to join the WhatsApp team. So without further ado, let's get into this episode.
Today's show guest serves as the head of engineering at Modern Treasury. If you're interested in job opportunities at the company, please see the link in the show notes for more information.
Thank you, JB. Thank you, Terence, for having me here.
Welcome.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining. So I guess one question that we always like to kind of get things started is, Shruthi, how did you get into tech to begin with? If you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit of your origin story.
That's a good question. And usually one takes a certain step because they are at the juncture of an opportunity and are actually prepared to take that opportunity. And for me, I got into tech primarily because of being from a family with a STEM background, being fairly good at STEM myself, thankfully, and growing up in a city like Bangalore in India in the 1990s. And in the early 90s, India was just about opening its doors to the global economy. And Bangalore, which had already been kind of like a hub for the electrical, aeronautical, and telecom industries, was also becoming the hub for what is today a huge software industry. And so that was the opportunity that was presented to me. And in addition to that, my dad taught physics at the high school and undergrad level for nearly 40 years. And I know, right? And my mom graduated with a degree in chemistry and zoology. STEM was always front and center in our house, I guess. And when I graduated with a CS degree, I got an offer from HP, that's Hewlett Packard, to work on their Unix operating systems team. They were just about bootstrapping that team in Bangalore in the year 2000. Yeah, I know it's a long time ago. And so I began my career in tech, working on computer science, building core operating systems at HP.
Nice.
Wow, awesome.
And so you said that, that's kind of how you started your journey. So what's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew back then, kind of starting out that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things thinking about this, right, like one of the things is to be open to change. When I was at Google, I had become fairly comfortable with the big company role, and it took a bit to push myself out of that zone. There's all that free food and micro kitchens and massages and sleep pods, and who wants to leave all of that, right?
Yeah.
But if I weren't open to change, I definitely wouldn't have worked at WhatsApp, which was kind of like a life-changing opportunity. And I definitely wouldn't have been here today in my role at Modern Treasury either, building this awesome engineering team at Modern Treasury. So my advice to my old self would be, don't be too afraid to explore new paths. Don't be afraid of change. Innovation is change. Change is uncomfortable, but it is also an opportunity. There is usually a new technological wave every decade or so. In hindsight, it is easy to see the PC desktop era in the 1980s. And the internet search and social wave in the 1990s, and the mobile era starting in the late 2000s, social 2.0 with messaging, etc., and then like the era of cloud infrastructure. And one can argue that there is a fintech or a crypto Web3 or a AI ML wave going on right now.
Definitely.
And it is important to recognize these big shifts in technology, the massive platforms that emerge, and learn and grow with these changes.
Definitely.
Wow, that's great advice. So, Shruti, you obviously you've held multiple positions of like being a head of engineering. So you've obviously have found a way to kind of like work your way up. Is there any advice you have for listeners as far as like how to prepare for the next level, and kind of like to know if they're like when they're selling themselves short, and like how to kind of like prepare for that next step from being your junior developer to senior developer to principal and even all the way up to head of engineering. So any advice you have for kind of like setting goals maybe and working your way up?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things I would say is to set the right expectations with your leadership and on what you're expecting to get out of your career. For me, whether I'm moving up the ladder or not is not super important, as long as I'm building a product that adds utilitarian value and that is addressing a true market need. I would like to focus on growing the product and the company, growing the proverbial pie for everyone. That is more important to me than focusing on my promotion or growing my individual slice of the pie. And promotions, etc., are just a side effect of my tech growth and the product and the company's growth for me. But that's just me, and your priorities might be completely different, and it's okay to like admit that. It's okay to accept that. Um, and it's important to have these ongoing conversations about your priorities, what you think is important for your career growth with your manager and leadership. It's also important to be honest with oneself as to what is it that you want out of your career. It's also common to go through phases where you optimize for one thing and drop something else. Like there have been phases in my career where I was optimizing for like money or salary, right? And that's okay. You have a family to take care of. You have other financial commitments, and it's okay to like optimize for like salary or money at some point. But then there are other times when I've been like, this is not important to me right now. I have like a reasonable buffer, so I want to try something new and I want to learn from that experience. So it's okay to understand that your career like typically grows in phases, and there are various different types of growth. Growing to the next level is not the only type of growth. You can use other types of things, other proxies that also indicate that you're growing in your career. Yeah.
All right, JB, do you have the next question? I have one more
Yeah.
spin-off question off of that I think especially it might roll into to what you look at for when you're looking for candidates. So are you saying that potentially we might not necessarily get a promotion from a position, but the experience might help be just as important as a promotion would be maybe long term?
Yeah, something like that. I think what I'm saying is that it's okay to focus on personal growth, company growth, product growth, and focus on growing in those areas rather than just focusing on a promotion, because a promotion should be a side effect of like all the good work that you're doing and all the like the product growth that you're seeing for the company. Because as long as the product is growing and as long as you are growing technically, then that's great. That will come off use at some point in time, even if you're not seeing like an immediate promotion. I feel like many people, including myself, at points of time, I've been like, oh, I need to get this promotion in like the next 6 months. Otherwise, like
Yeah.
it's all wrong. It's all incorrect if I don't get it. But then I realized that that is not the most important thing that I should be focusing on.
So, since Terrence brought applicants into the conversation, uh, what would you say applicants should be looking for when looking at different companies? Because you've had a chance to, go from various companies. And so what type of advice would you give in that sense?
Um, I think great products and companies spring from like three things, in my opinion. One, the first thing is I would look for a product and a mission that I can relate to. Having built payments at WhatsApp, when I was joining Modern Treasury, I could see what Modern Treasury solves is a very real problem for businesses. Every business in the world needs to move money between their bank accounts and their customers' bank accounts, but there are no standardized APIs that one can use to do this other than Modern Treasury, that is. So this is a problem that I could 100% relate to and get behind, and relationship with the mission of the company and the product is very important when you're looking for a new role at a new company. The second thing that I would look for is if the company is solving a very large and prevalent problem. Specifically in the SaaS world, if several businesses are trying to solve the same problem or building the same system, then there's a very real potential to build that into a successful product and a company around it. Like in the case of payments, if you look at companies in the past 3 decades or so, like 5, 10, 20, 30 years or so, they've all individually put in enormous amounts of resources and teams to build payment systems in-house. But if a solution such as Modern Treasury existed, they're more than likely to buy it than to put the time and resources to build it. And that is evident from the customer traction that Modern Treasury has seen so far. And finding like a large problem like this that many people or many businesses are facing is very important to look at when you're looking for your next role as well. The third thing I would say is to look for a great set of founders who have seen this problem before, who can bring a certain level of depth and insight into the solution space. In the case of Modern Treasury, the founders, Dimitri, Matt, and Sam, had built a payments system before at a mortgage lending company. So they come with a very practical understanding of the space, which goes a long way in building like a utilitarian product and an efficient team. So yeah, I would say those are some of the things that I personally look for and worked out really well for me in terms of like finding my next role in various at various times.
Those are some really good nuggets. Thank you.
Yeah. So I heard you mention Modern Treasury a little bit. Did you want to speak a little bit? I guess give an overview for those who might not know about a little bit more about Modern Treasury, and then kind of like where you see the product in the short, middle term, and long term.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. In a nutshell, in one line, Modern Treasury is a platform that businesses use to move and track money. Every business has the need to move money to their customers or their vendors, right? For example, you may be a marketplace that needs to pay out to the merchants on your platform every month, or you may be a lending company that needs to receive money from the people that bought loans and pay out to the lenders on your platform. Or you may be an insurance company or a mortgage company or a fintech company. All of these companies have a need to move money regularly. And like I was saying, in the past several decades, companies have built such payment systems in-house. They have hired large teams of engineers and finance controllers, and they've spent years building payment systems and managing payment operations. With the influx of a large fintech industry and the many like products out there that move money programmatically today, the need for such systems has only grown. And Modern Treasury exists to provide a solution to this kind of like payment systems and operations problem right out of the box. Another analogy that I can give is like when we were building like software companies like 20 years ago, we built all the infrastructure and the data centers ourselves, like Google and Facebook and companies like that 20 years ago would actually buy land and build buildings and put data centers and buy cages and put servers and hire people to deploy software and monitor software and all of that themselves, and all of that happened in house, right? But nowadays nobody does that anymore. Most companies are using AWS infrastructure or Google Cloud Platform or Microsoft Azure or one of those types of infrastructure companies to build their software. And we are seeing that there is such a change that is happening in the payment systems, payments infrastructure world as well, where there is a strong need for a company like Modern Treasury to provide this type of solution right out of the box.
And so, you've talked about your transition of, going from WhatsApp to Modern Treasury and things like that. So, throughout your career, when's a time where you had to make, those difficult decisions, where the main decision makers, like, who are the main decision makers in the company? Like, since you're, the lead of engineering, how does that work and things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I have like off late as the team is growing, making like a ton of hiring decisions for the team. There is typically a rubric of sorts for these types of interviews and interview pipelines, but there's also a subjective element to hiring, and each of these decisions individually can be pretty tough. The other decisions that have been much harder are times in the past when you have to, fail fast, or you have to pivot the team or change the direction of a team. As for the decision makers, critical decisions should have one or two key owners or stakeholders. Like if it's a product decision you're making, then the product manager lead has the veto. If it is a decision related to the team, then I discuss that with the other engineering managers. If it's a tech decision, then I discuss it with my CTO or other like senior engineers in the company. But it's also important to not get into this analysis paralysis mode. One must be willing to take a stance at times and make a decision, even though you may not have all the information that you need to make the perfect decision.
That was actually a part that I was hoping that you would hit on is, not getting stuck in that space. So yeah, definitely.
Right. So another question we had was ambiguity. Like, what is something you learned while dealing with ambiguity?
I have a number of anecdotes around this, like deciding the product strategy, to what a good customer journey should look like, to what technologies should we be using, should we be buying or building technologies, what's the right architecture, are we over engineering, are we under committing. All of those situations are like extremely ambiguous. And working at a startup is about making like hundreds of these such decisions that one needs to make with imperfect information at hand. That's just the nature of the role, because a startup by its very nature works on new and groundbreaking things. Many times it's hard to find a pattern to match to, or an example to learn from, or a precedent to look for while making a decision. You have to go back to thinking from first principles and aligning the team based on that. Like some things that we will never compromise on is the quality, the stability, and the security of the payments product that we're building at Modern Treasury. And those are the engineering values that we uphold. You kind of become the torchbearer of an exemplary technology or product by having that clarity of thought to make decisions based on these principles that you then have to uphold even in imperfect conditions.
That was a great answer. Because when it comes to companies and things like that, there's a lot of decisions that, especially in startups, that are just ambiguous and, trying to figure out those things and building from the ground up to make sure that you're able to scale well and things like that. So that was really a great answer. Um, so that was all the questions that we had for you, but we did want to leave space for anything that you wanted to add or things like that to kind of bring us to a close.
Yeah, no, it was great chatting. Yeah, and looking forward to meeting you all sometime again soon.
Definitely. Yes.
Yep, sounds good. And as always, feel free to use our platform, or if you ever need to get the word out about anything, to come back and speak on any topic. So we definitely appreciate the time.
Yes,
Of
please.
course. Yep. Thank you for having me.
So with that, um, we will close out and thank you, Shruti, for, coming on and talking with us. And as always, I'm JB,
I'm Terrence.
and we'll see you next time.
All right, see you guys next time.